Awesome. Looks like we are live. We got some folks filtering in from the waiting room, so we'll give it a couple minutes here. Austin, Garth, good seeing and talking to you guys. It's been what all of about 3 or 4 days since the Hunt Expo, so we were
Yeah,
just talking about getting caught up from that and whatnot there. So how's things going down where you guys are?
been good. Been busy. We're real dry down here, moisture wise. Southern Utah's not sitting too well. We had a good time up at the Hunt Expo. Northern Utah's getting plenty of moisture, seems
Yeah,
like.
they got good moisture.
This Southern Utah's taking the hit.
Yeah, I got rained on when I was on one of those lift scooters up there going to dinner actually at your guys' house. So that was good. But yeah, we were just talking up in Montana. We got a lot of snow, a lot of precip while we were down there. So that is good to see. But yeah, we'll give it just a second here and then kind of kick things off. I've got a few housekeeping items to let everybody know, and I'll kind of run through those, and then we'll jump into some Colorado draw changes. And from my limited knowledge, there are quite a few of them. So I'm excited myself tonight to learn what those are and what that means for myself and everybody on the webinar here moving forward for Colorado. But um, couple different housekeeping things. Like I said, don't worry, your guys' audio and video are off. So we can't see you, you're muted. Second thing, make sure that you are utilizing the Q&A function at the bottom. So use the chat, let folks know. I see several people in there right now. Let us know where you're tuning in from, chat amongst yourselves. But if you want a question actually answered by Austin, Garth, or myself, we're going to take some of the more higher priority questions toward the end and make sure you're using the Q&A function there. So all personal onX account stuff, go to help@onxmaps.com. That's going to be the best way to get you guys taken care of, not the Q&A. So there's that one. And then we are going to be doing a cool giveaway toward the end. Make sure you stick around for that. And then we'll drop a link in for that and get signed up. It's super, super cool and really easy to enter. And last but not least, if you guys are watching this live after the fact, so we post different clips of this or possibly even the whole thing on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching it live, obviously that Q&A is closed. Sorry about that, but you do have to be here live in order to take advantage of that. So with that being said, looks like we are mostly trickled in for the folks that are here. I'm sure a few will jump on late, but Austin, Garth, I will kind of kick it over to you and take it away.
Great.
Right?
Well, welcome to the party. It's a great day. And Colorado is such a diverse state that everybody in the West should be hunting or trying to hunt or have a plan to hunt someday. So we definitely want to talk about that. And it's been a hot one in the news recently because there are quite a few changes, both in the last couple of years. There's been changes this year, 2025. There's changes, and there's some bigger changes coming down the pipe pretty soon. So my name's Austin Atkinson. I've done a few of these before. I've worked at Huntin for about 10 years now and still enjoy it and helping people go on hunts. So that's me.
Yeah, I'm Garth Jensen. I've done a couple of these as well. I worked here for, I don't know, 10, 11 years. But I've been hunting Colorado for since 2000. I think was the first time I ever hunted Colorado. So for a hot minute, and it's probably one of my favorite states to hunt. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought when you said it's diverse, I thought you were going down the diversity avenue, and I was like, yeah, they are going down that road. But hunting wise, love the state. I always have. It's been a great state to me. I probably hunted there more than any other state out west outside of my home state of Utah.
Yep. Pretty awesome state. So let's jump in. We're going to kind of divide this into three different parts. You can see there at the top. The first part about Colorado Draw, we're just going to cover some high level basics, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what we're talking about here. Then we're going to talk about 2025 changes, meaning this year, and then 2028 changes, and we'll explain why that's so far out, but it's going to affect everything now. So basic overview, everything in Colorado outside of the few over-the-counter opportunities for rifle elk, bear, those sort of things, everything's managed through their draw. So you need to be aware of the primary draw, which the deadline will be April 1st not an April Fool's joke, but
Mhm.
it will be April 1st this year. That's a Tuesday. And then that's all species in the main draw. We get results soon thereafter for sheep and goat by mid-April. We'll see results there. The rest of the results for all the other species won't be until the end of May. This calendar timeline is important as you plan your other states' applications and figure out what you're going to do. Any licenses that are returned or unclaimed or unpaid for will roll into a secondary draw with a deadline of June 30th. And those results come out about July 7th. So those are kind of the two draws. You'll hear those terms used: primary draw, secondary draw. You must have a valid small game license to apply. So a couple of years ago, they said you have to have a qualifying license. So like a spring turkey tag counts. There's a couple other licenses you can buy to be eligible in the draw. It's not a hunting license, if you will, like we're used to in other states where you buy a base hunting license and then you add on your applications. It's just a qualifier. So they sell you a small game license you're probably not going to use, but it's $114 for an adult and it's substantially cheaper for a youth hunter. It's under $2, just $1.50 for a youth application or a youth small game license. And then it's $11 application fee per species, no point fees except for Rocky sheep, moose, and goat. That's $100 for adults only. So to get in the game, you pay that 114 small game license, then however many application species, $11 per species.
And like we were talking about earlier, you might be able to use that small games license while you're out there now, because you got to have one to shoot a coyote.
That's
So if you pull over and blow one of them over, now you got to have a small games license during the season to shoot one. You always have to have one anyways, but yeah, that's weird.
Yep. Continue on with a few more basics. The primary draw details, if you will, is bighorn sheep and mountain goat. Those quotas are set before the draw deadline of April 1st. So when we apply there as a non-resident or as a resident, you know how many licenses are available and how many you're applying for. So you can estimate what your draw odds are going to be a little better. For moose, elk, deer, antelope, and black bear, those quotas are not set or finalized from the state until after you've applied. So when you're applying for those species, you're applying based on what was last year, how many licenses were issued, what the quota breakdown was last year. They tell us that all these hunts are eligible for non-residents, like a moose hunt. You know, it's open, there'll be at least one license, so you can apply for it, but you don't know exactly how many there's going to be until after you've already applied and you can't change it. So that's why those results for moose, elk, deer, antelope come much later into the end of May, is because the quotas aren't set yet.
Yeah. Yeah. They still got to go through same thing in other states like Utah. They'll set those quotas after the application period's already closed. But yeah.
The best thing to do is look at the draw recap reports from the year before and look at draw odds from 2024 in Hunt Research Tools so that you can decide and estimate what it's going to be like. The secondary draw, that's all the returned or unclaimed licenses, as we mentioned. It's not that they're all bad licenses. It's not a leftover draw, if you will. It's anything that's not picked up, that's not automatically awarded to the next guy in line, will go into the secondary draw. So there could be some good licenses pop up there. The only thing about the secondary draw is they give 100% preference to youth, all four choices of youth hunters. So I like it. It allows youth to sneak in there. If they didn't get lucky in the primary draw, the youth are going to draw all those licenses first until all the youth have got all their choices, and then they'll roll to the adults. So it's a money grab sometimes on the adult side because a lot of adults are applying for all these tags they want, but their odds are zero if the youth hunters take all the tags first.
And honestly, like I've been my child's been the benefactor of that. She's drawn a couple tags. I know other friends that their kids have drawn tags on that. And shoot, at the end of the day, like anything that's what is it, higher than 5 points or more, isn't even if it's returned right after, it's not put in that secondary draw. So I mean, it's not like they're just. I mean, there's some good tags. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's not like we're stealing from
It's opportunity.
Yeah, it's opportunity. So it's a good thing.
Yep. I like it.
I mean, the leftover day and the reissue Wednesdays, that comes into effect after the secondary draw has been concluded. Then they'll have a deadline where all those other tags that are still remaining after that secondary draw or that were returned after that deadline will be lumped into that leftover tag day, that where all the leftover tags will be reissued. And then every Wednesday following that, they'll reissue the next ones that have been returned or that are still, like, you can buy those ones that are still remaining, I think, all through the week.
Yep.
But anything's been returned will be issued the following Wednesday.
That's gotten more difficult to grab.
Yeah.
Right. If you're at a licensed vendor, you can stand in line. You might be able to snag one faster, but I've struggled trying to get tags throughout the season
Very tough.
online, not being in state. You just can't click fast enough and get through the checkout process fast enough.
It's very tough.
So that's some basics. Couple more things to keep in mind on the licenses. When results come out, so say you apply the end of March before the deadline, you don't get results till the end of May. There's a short period after results come out that you can surrender your license, and it's like a reversal. It's almost if you didn't draw it. So they refund you and your points are reinstated back to your pre-draw level. So it's a good, oh, I don't want this. My schedule has changed. You bow out.
You gotta be quick though, because there's a link in that draw email they send out to you that you can click on to do that. But man, it's fast. I mean, like we were looking at it, and it's like a 4-day window maybe.
Yep.
To turn around and get that reversal. But if you know your draws, like if you know your schedule has changed and you can't do it, it's the best of both worlds. Because if you wait till after that, like it says right there, you have to select whether you get a refund or your points reinstated, but you can't have both. That's that only window where you can have both, is shortly thereafter. And you can surrender your tag up to 30 days prior to the season beginning to have that selection whether you want a refund or a preference point. The only time like you would select well, if you had a lot of points, but if you drew a second choice, you can still get a refund on that. And it's not affecting your points because it didn't use your points to draw.
Use them. Yep. Only going to be for your first choice.
For your first choice.
Yep. If you still are like just going to go, say, on a rifle over the counter tag, you don't need to buy that qualifying small game license.
Yep.
But if you're going to hunt in Colorado, we would recommend you apply in the draw, build points, and therefore you're going to have to buy that small game license that you're not going to use. Okay. Those are the basics for Colorado. We've got a few questions coming in. Remember to put those on the Q&A if you have those, and we'll make sure to cover them. But I think most people are asking about the next few changes that we're going to cover here. So that's up till 2024. Coming into 2025, we've got a few different things. What is new for 2025? The first one that we're going to go into depth a little more is all non-resident archery elk licenses are now in the draw, 100% of them.
Yeah.
So over the last few years, we've lost over-the-counter archery opportunities, meaning they've taken units that were over-the-counter and they've put them into a draw quota to manage a limited number of licenses there. Now all units are. So the ones that were remain, and all over-the-counter archery is gone for elk.
I mean, it was a trickle effect. We could see that happening. The difference here is it was just primarily targeted at non-residents because residents felt like that was primarily the people that were hunting them. There was more non-resident hunters than there was resident hunters. And in some cases that was true. I mean, some units, by the time they went down through your first and second, third choice, the residents quit applying for it after the first, second choice. So there was a very small number, but there was still a pile of non-residents applying. And so they just kept awarding the tags because they're leftover.
Yeah.
So in some cases that's true, but they had a couple nominations on there, I think, to have resident and non-resident. Residents didn't like that very much, which I don't blame them.
They didn't.
So yeah, this year that all non-resident archery elk license will be on draw. Now, the one thing to remember is they are going to try and set them at that level, right? Like at the level that the amount of tags were drawn the year prior, or hunters that were in there, not drawn, but the amount of hunters that were on those the year prior. So there's going to be a fair amount of them.
They are. We'll talk about that number in a second, but all our 5-year season structure has been revamped again, and starting in 2025, it'll start that 5-year season structure. So that means that all the dates are set. They're late on the calendar this year for 2025, and then they'll roll with the calendar one day earlier over the next 5 years. So first rifle season is 5 days. Second and third rifle are both now 9 days. So you got 2 weekends again on that third rifle. And then fourth rifle is just the 5 days up close to Thanksgiving. So those are your dates. Those are set. You can look at those for the next 5 years and plan ahead knowing what those seasons are going to be.
Yeah, and understand when we say they're late, they're the latest they're going to be in this 5-year season structure.
Correct.
But they're not as late as they have been the past 5 years, which is good. I mean, that's going to protect a few of the older age class bucks. We might start to see some of those, at least mature buck numbers bounce back a little bit from that, but they're still pretty late.
Is this where you would like to see season dates? You've hunted in Colorado a lot.
I like it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The third rifle is still too late for me. Like, in my opinion, I think there's too big of a gap there between second and third. I would like to see that third rifle start earlier than that. Like, the latest I ever had it before, I think I started on the 6th, and that was 6th or 7th. That was the very latest before that last 5-year debacle. But I like this better than the prior 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. They did add some seasons. Usually deer hunts will be the second, third, and fourth rifle this season, and first rifle is kind of an elk only. But this year they added some deer units will have that concurrent first rifle deer season. Kind of see how that goes. It's a tough time of year to hunt deer as they transition, but your unit may have those if you're looking at them.
I mean, they had early rifle seasons before, but most of the time there was only a couple units or few units out there that actually had unit-wide early dates. Most of them were like limited to high elevation. These are separate from that. Like it's a true first rifle 5-day season.
Yep. They split the popular antelope hunts in unit 87, 88 in that north central part of Colorado. There's 2 seasons there, an early and a late. That late one might be tough.
I think that was a dispersed hunting pressure because they were trying to cram too many people in there. And what they're finding out is by the time the first or second day dust settled, there wasn't very many antelope on public land anymore.
That's right.
So they tried to disperse them, but I think that second season, that's going to be it's going to be a tough one. They did start some late cow moose hunts this year too. That's new this year. Those cow moose hunts that that they added this year, basically what that's going to do is that's going to run concurrent with all those rifle seasons you see in front of you. They didn't do it in every unit. They did it in a few units out there. Again, I don't know we don't know how many tags are going to issue for these. We don't know how aggressive, if they're going to just shift tags from that initial first rifle moose season they had the first part of October. But it's interesting. You're going to have hunters in the field. There's going to be a lot more hunting pressure, but you do get more days because you can hunt all of those seasons until you harvest.
That's right.
So that's an interesting new.
Different. Mm-hmm. And then every year Colorado does a slight annual increase in their license fees across the board, based on the consumer price index. So everything goes up a little bit. It's not the same as last year. We have seen some increases just recently where cow elk is the same price as bull elk now if it's an A license. So it's expensive.
Yeah, the bear jumped up last year, but
they just keep playing with that bear price tag. They up, down, up, down. But, okay, so that's 2025. Talking about the first bullet point, archery elk that is no longer over the counter. You'll see hunt codes. We cover this in our March magazine of the Huntin' Fool, but all hunt codes now will be either an either sex or a male, or some have a female only tag. So that code will start with an E, it'll have the unit in the middle, and it'll end with V1A. V1 is their new code for non-resident only. And they're going to set those quotas based on unit groupings. So some units are by themselves, some units are lumped together. And they will set the quota, like Gar said, based on the amount of non-resident archery elk participation last year. Estimating, right? Those are all estimations on how many bought a license. They know just over 13,000 for the over-the-counter archery units in 2024. But now they're going to disperse those amongst the unit groupings where people said they hunted. So what does that mean? It should mean if you want to hunt over-the-counter archery units of what were over the counter and you want to hunt them this year, you should have 100% draw odds if you put them as your first choice.
And there's going to be a lot of those, in my opinion, that are probably going to go down to second, third, fourth, and even leftover. Especially you look at the ones that have large number of units, like 4 or 5 units in that grouping together. There's a good chance there's going to be a lot of tags issued in there. And so you're probably going to have a pretty good odds of actually drawing that tag second choice. So you can build points and draw that at your second choice and still get to go hunt.
Yep.
They do have I think some of those units do have a female non-resident code as well. So it'll be an EF. But man, you know what I wish it had done? Instead of V1A, they should have put NRA. Like
Non-resident.
God.
I don't know what V means.
I don't either.
V.
I don't either. I mean, they could have made it simpler. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like anyone that has always, because I do talk to a lot of people that they say, well, I just hunted over the counter elk, Colorado, so I never had to participate in the draw, which fine. But now, really, you should, because if this is any type of precursor, I mean, I hate to say it, but even if you're like, hey, I only hunt over the counter second rifle, I got a place I got to go. Well, there might be a day in the near future when now over the counter rifle. Now, I'm not predicting anything. It's not like I heard anything through the grapevine and I've been soliciting information underground, but yeah, the writing's on the wall. So we might start to see those rifle hunts go to draw too. So you should definitely start building points if you're interested in continuing to hunt elk in Colorado.
Estimating, like Gar said, exactly what this is going to look like, it's going to take a couple of years to settle out, right? It's going to depend on participation. What we're seeing with Idaho over-the-counter elk tags being much more difficult to get, Wyoming general tags taking more points. We're seeing a lot of pressure put on Colorado, so it's not going to stay the same, and it's going to increase. People are going to jump units and try to figure out how to use their points, because a lot of people have been building points in Colorado for elk and just hunting over the counter archery every year. Well, now you may not be able to do that and still pick up your tag depending on which unit you're used to hunting in.
Yeah. And for those guys that are like just panic now, because now all their over the counter stuff and those units like north of Meeker and some of that country up in there, because you could hunt private land, you just had to buy an over the counter tag and units you had to draw. Well, they do have a P1A private land code, so you can put in for that. From what I've been told, they're going to issue plenty of tags in there, so is that it's going to hopefully exhaust the demand. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have plenty of tags in there, so you can still hunt that. You just have to apply for that P1A hunt code.
That's right. Over the counter, like you said, for now, unchanged.
Yeah.
For rifle.
Yep.
Okay. Does that cover everything you wanted to talk about in 2025 changes? I think so. I mean, it's big changes for those that are used to archery elk hunting. But it's important to distinguish. They did all these changes kind of at the same time. So yes, we've decided on 2028 changes now, but they don't go into effect because there's some education time needed. But these 2025, they are now for this year.
My big takeaway would probably be this. If you have a unit that you've been hunting over the counter for archery over there all these years and you really love it, put it as your first choice. If you don't have a pile of points or you're just barely starting out, just put it as your first choice. You'll get it.
Yeah.
If you do want to build points and you're like, I'm not really sure, but I don't really have a unit over there that I really stuck on, build a point as your first choice and put some of them as your second choice. Because I mean, I'm betting that most of them are going to go into a second choice. May not be guaranteed, but heck, we still got some of those bull tags down there that, in some of those units in the southwest corner that are still have chance of second choice. So I'm guessing these ones are going to have pretty good odds. I don't know. That's my takeaway.
Good question here from Jeremiah that's related to this. How are they going to decide to split up these 13,000 archery licenses to the old over-the-counter units? And are they going to do that before the application or after? It's after, right? So you are essentially applying blind for the unit you want. If you must have an archery elk tag this year, I wouldn't risk it on your second or third choice, hoping that you grab it. Like Gar said, put it as your first, but they will not decide on the final numbers per unit until after you've applied.
I mean, I can tell you this. If you look at hunt numbers, the amount of hunters that they had, like we were talking about earlier, participation for that hunt code, you can look at that and get a fairly good estimation that they're probably going to issue a lot of tags in that unit or very little.
Yep.
You know, some units are there's a lot of elk in there, so there's a lot of people that go there. Other units, they're just really popular, so a lot of people go there. So you can kind of look back over the past history if you go in either Colorado or some of these other tools and figure out how many hunters were actually participating in that over the counter. And then you can kind of, say, okay, well, I have a reasonable expectation of there's going to be a lot of tags here.
Yep. Okay, let's jump to 2028. If this wasn't enough change, we're going to change even more going into 2028.
A
So
lot more.
2 years ago, the commission asked for the department or the Parks and Wildlife to put together what they called a draw working group. That's just a committee like other states do, to try to get stakeholders from the outfitters, from every part of the state, and get them into the same room for multiple meetings and workshops and come up with some recommendations. The draw working group was put together, 8 members of the public, 7 members of staff, and they held meetings October 2023 through May of 24. There's a picture of the draw working group, for better or for worse. You can send them all letters if you don't like what they did, but just remember they recommended it. They didn't vote on all these changes. They just presented the votes to the commission. I was lucky enough to be, or I don't know if it's lucky.
After all the meetings, yeah, I don't know if that's a correct word.
I got to travel to Colorado and be a part of this draw working group for multiple meetings as the only non-resident. And we did start it at ground zero. They said, what draw should we have in Colorado? Forget everything we're doing. Let's talk about everything from points to over the counter draws, random point, everything was on the table. And we had some good meetings. We had some heated meetings. There was a lot of education placed in there, and the public process, we received a ton of public comment that we read through them all and tried to decide what to recommend. In the end, there was 3 workshops presented to the commission at Colorado, which is a very interesting commission, but they essentially decided on what to accept and what not to accept based on public comment and their own personal decisions.
Did you guys ever have a meeting where you actually said, let's abolish the whole point system and let's just go random like New Mexico?
Right out of the gate, that was one of the first meetings, is how do we simplify the draw in Colorado? How do we get new people involved and keep our loyal guys that have played the game and hunted Colorado for years, keep them involved? And honestly, the random draw just comes up as being very attractive. If you started a new state tomorrow, would you do a random draw? Maybe.
More than likely.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's the most fair. Obviously, Colorado couldn't do that. We're
Yeah.
in almost a 40-year point system in Colorado. It'd be really hard to do that. And so that's why they ended up with the recommendations that we had.
Yeah.
So basic recommendations from the working group that was voted on by the commission is change the primary draw to a split draw. This does not take effect till 2028 because there's some coding and we want everybody to know what the changes are so they can plan ahead and not just have the whole game changed. The split draw will essentially turn it into more like an Arizona or a Utah system.
Yeah.
Where 50% of the licenses will be awarded in a preference point draw to those that have the most points. And the other 50% of the quota will go randomly using bonus chances. So your points give you extra chances in the draw, but not guaranteed until you reach the highest level of points for that hunt code where you're on the preference side of the draw.
Yeah, the thing to remember is this is unlike the archery changes this year. This is across the board. This is for everybody. Residents, non-residents alike, anyone that applies is going to be adhere to this, split draw. So when we get into looking at that, we put a table together here to kind of give you an idea of what that entails. So you can see here under that table, like this is a unit 61 muzzleloader elk. Under the current draw system, you can see where everyone at 29 points drew. 100% goes to preference draw. Now, 4 out of those 7 with 28 drew, but anyone under that had 0 chance of drawing. So if you look down the next one, it's okay. Well, still all those people at 29 points drew, but now only one out of those 7 applicants at 28 points actually drew a tag. And then, of course, just a random happenstance. Now you got everyone putting in for that. And now all of a sudden it's a 2% chance. So, yes, you have a chance, but it's a very small amount. And the other thing to remember about this right now, there's a fair amount of applicants, like Austin said earlier, like those 140 some odd applicants that applied for it that had less than 28 probably didn't have any business applying for it in the current draw system because they had zero shot drawn. But now, instead of that being 141, that might balloon up to 300 to 500.
Because now you got a chance.
Now you got a chance, and someone's going to get it. And instead of putting in for a point, you put in for that. You know what I mean? And just try, because your ultimate goal is you're going to build a point. But you can see under that scenario right there, now instead of 3 people going up to 29 points the next year, now all of a sudden you've got 6 applicants that go to 29 points. So now those 6 applicants get up there. Well, all of a sudden you can't even draw that 29 point down.
Right.
So now that's not even drawing down the next year. So that's going to go to 30 because you're not drawing that the maximum level off. And the chances of one of those other top point holders drawing some of those random tags, yeah, the guy with 28 has a better chance than the guy with 27, but does he have a better chance of drawing that, or does the field have a better chance of drawing that? And honestly, and obviously the field has a better chance of drawing one of those. So you can see how that point creep might start to creep in and escalate.
It's complicated, right? The word fair always comes up. Is this fair? Well, how do you define fair? Is it more equal? Well, the guys with more points have better shot.
Correct.
But even the new guy has a shot
Mhm.
with 0 points. So they're looking at sustainability. How do we make it more fair for the new guys to want to start applying? Where these top units are 30 years, 30 points. Like, that's not very attractive to the new guy.
Yeah, that's the word I like to use more when describing it. Is I don't like the word fair because nothing's fair, but it's more attractive. So, and that's at the end of the day, what the state needs is that they need some type of attraction to get people to keep applying.
Yep.
I've got a question on this one here. So the random draw, the bonus, are they planning on squaring the bonus points or anything similar to other states, or is that just if you've got 27 points, how does that work out for bonus?
You just get an additional chance for each one of those points you have. So, I mean, I did run it the same as Utah from what I believe, that you have a chance for your application, and then for every other point you have, you get an additional chance.
Okay, so if I've got 27 points, essentially I have 27 of my names in the hat versus somebody with 0, or 1, I should say, would have 1 chance.
You got 28 because
28, copy.
if you have 27 points, you have 27 extra chances, but your application also counts for a chance. Right?
Clear as mud, Dylan.
Yep, no, it's clear. That makes it more attractive for somebody with less points to apply for sure. So, yeah, that's definitely clear and good to know, especially as you look out, like you said, a couple of years in advance.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's the primary draw, split draw. Couple details that come into effect. If there's only one license available, that license will go on the preference side. So there is still a chance to draw dead or be applying for a 0% chance, but that's only if there's one non-resident license available.
Yep.
The random draw, like we said with Dylan, will use your points as bonus extra chances. Another big change though is you must select if you want to purchase a preference point or apply for hunts. You will no longer be able to put a point as your first choice and hunts as your second, third, and fourth. They're not going to allow you to double dip like that anymore. You could put a really tough unit to draw as your first choice and put in a second choice, but you're not going to be able to do both.
And you'll gain a point at the end of the day if you're unsuccessful on your first choice.
Yep. Only burning your points if you draw your first. That doesn't change.
the new point fee, which was fun.
That did not come from the draw working group.
It did not. That came straight from the, I think, CPW controller, who looked at the financial side of that and said, this is a cool thing we could do. There's been a lot of blowback though, so we don't quite know if that's going to stick around, but they did decide as of right now, 2028, there will be a 15-point fee for residents and a $30 non-resident point fee for elk, deer, pronghorn, bear, and turkey. So if you go in there as a non-resident and you apply for elk, deer, and antelope, now all of a sudden you're looking at $90 on top of your $114 license, on top of your $11 per species application fee. So all of a sudden this state was a pretty good value. And with that point fee, it just jumped up to a pretty expensive state, like way more than most of these other states to apply for.
I'm hopeful that that gets overturned. They did vote on that, but that's a lot. It's a little egregious compared to,
Yeah.
We had a point fee in Colorado before we had to buy that qualifying license, and now we're spending all that money already. So
Yeah.
that is how it sits right now for 2028, but there is still time for the commission to change their mind on
That's
that.
what happens when the bean counters take over.
Yeah, they're like, I got an idea how we can make more money.
Yeah.
Really? Let's charge everybody more. No.
Yeah.
So that's how that came to be. But we'll see.
The good thing is, and this is I would say a little bit of a win for non-residents, is the 75 resident quota, 25 non-resident quota split. Obviously, we're not getting our 65-35 back that we had for non-high demand, but it simplified things. Before they had a high demand that was 80-20, and then they had a non-high demand that was 65-35, but then they changed it last year to 75-25 for the non-high demand and 80-20 for high demand. They're just like, that's a freaking mess. Just 75-25. So we will see a few of those units, those high demand units. We will see maybe a tag or two more in that. Like we talked earlier, the difference is now instead of one license, there's going to be two. So one's going to go to random and one's going to go to the high point guy. But that is a win, honestly. Like it is a good deal.
It's trying to simplify it. Like that was one of the goals of the draw working group. Is this is so complicated to explain the hybrid and the high demand to everybody, and it creates a coding nightmare for the guys that actually run the draw, trying to program in based on old draw odd reports, and it's a moving target. Like, please just tell people what they're applying for up front.
And again, this is only for those species you see listed there. You know what I mean? This is not for sheep, moose, and goat. But so no more hybrid draw. That was another confusing thing.
Yep.
Anyone that had over 5 points or more was eligible to be put in for the hybrid draw, but the non-residents never drew any of them except antelope, and so simplified it, made it a lot better. The one thing with the first and second choice that you see on the bottom there, resident and non-resident quotas for first and second choice. That was a big push for the residents because, like on that scenario I listed to you before, where basically those second choice licenses were going to a bunch of non-residents for areas that residents really weren't applying for. They saw that and they're like, we can't have that happen, because now there was 250 second choice applications that were, that were given to non-residents, and there was 5 given to residents. Well, that was because there were only 5 residents that applied as a second choice. So they're trying to exhaust all those tags. So all they did is they just moved it so now that quota adheres to both your first and second choice. So doesn't mean that your points are getting purged for your second choice. It just means that quota is still in place. So what's going to happen now is those residents still aren't going to apply for that tag. And then they're just going to only, basically they're going to probably have that 25% already allocated. So no one's going to draw as a second choice for non-residents. And then guess what? Everyone that applies third and fourth choice is going to draw it.
Yeah.
So we're still going to come out with the same thing. You just got to remember to apply for a third or fourth choice.
It's complicated. I mean, in the end, you're not going to make everybody happy.
Correct.
Residents versus non-residents, high point holders versus low point holders. It's tough. Like, I feel for the guys that have a lot of points and they're looking at this, say, wait, why are you taking away the value of my points? I've waited 30 years. But we'll show you, like, there's just not enough licenses to go around. And they want to do something. On the primary draw for Rocky sheep, moose, and goat, they didn't make as many changes. So they changed some of the terminology. There you have 3 preference points, which is max, and then weighted points in addition to that. So for sheep, moose, and goat, you hear people say, oh, I have 3 plus 5 or 3 plus 10. It's meaning 3 preference, 10 weighted. They're just going to merge those points together, add them together, and call it a point. So now you just have a sheep point. It's going to function as a bonus draw. So all the licenses will be issued in a random bonus draw. Essentially what they're doing currently, but different terminology. They'll run the draw a little different. You're going to get better chances as you get more points, but you're not guaranteed anything because it is just random, which is how it is now. It'll still be the same 90% resident, 10% non-resident quotas. That remains unchanged. But they will institute a once in a lifetime bag limit beginning with 2028. So if you kill a ram, sheep, a bull moose, or a goat with an either sex goat license, that'll be your once in a lifetime. There's some residents that aren't happy with that. Very few non-residents have drawn multiple, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of licenses for these species in the state of Colorado, respectively. So there are repeat offenders, we could call them, that have drawn multiple sheep tags or multiple goat tags, but they want to put a stop to that and say, no, it's once in a lifetime if you harvest. If you don't harvest, you could draw again. But if you harvest a ram, a bull moose, you are out.
Well, ironically, this is what's funny is when they started this bag limit, I mean, obviously they had lots of goats and lots of sheep and very few moose. So the moose was always once in a lifetime.
It was.
And now there's way more moose than sheep and goat, but they still have once in a lifetime for moose, but not for sheep or goat. So it's kind of just aligning that and being like, okay, listen, like it's a once in a lifetime tag. And let's just make it across the board and simplify it, and then we're not counting waiting periods. And
Yep.
So it was good. It was a good change.
As far as the reissue process, this is something that we brought up there. We got to have a better process to keep more tags off the reissued list. So starting in August, they would do this reissue list and the tags just jump on there by the hundreds, and first come, first serve, people would buy them and they don't use your points if you buy a reissued list. It's cool if you're the guy that gets the tag, but what about all these guys that would have been next in line to draw that now get nothing?
Squadish.
Yep. So this will be similar to a Nevada system where you can opt in to be an alternate, so that if someone returns a tag for any reason, instead of pushing it to the leftover list, they would reissue it or charge your card, burn your points, and award it to the next guy in line that would have drawn. I think it's the more fair way to do it. A guy applied for that. Let's give the tag to him rather than someone else that's not even going to use their points. You will have the option to opt in to that list or opt out. Say your schedule changes and you're like, oh, I don't want to get that deer tag now. I've got too much going on. You could uncheck the box, remove yourself from the auto reissued program at any time.
Which is really nice. That's a great feature.
Hopefully it'll
Work.
I think it will. Someone's going to get the tag.
Yeah.
That'll stop 14 days before the season opens. So it's not going to be super last minute auto reissues, but it could happen all throughout the summer, depending on when the season opener is. Burn your points, charge the card, boom, you get the tag. Great. You can still return it, but if it's within the 30 days of the season, you're not going to be able to return it and get your points back or that. This will hopefully cut down on the amount of licenses on that weekly reissue list, make it a little more fair to give to the guys next in line. Anything that's returned, super last minute, or by the time it gets processed, it's within the 14-day window before the opener, that'll still go on the first come, first serve list and just try to sell it to someone. But this list has been popular. A lot of people get licenses this way and preserve their points, but you start taking people's points and charging them automatically, it'll change the game a little, and hopefully it's just those that are interested. But the computer is going to do it, when currently there's some more manual processes in there to try to award the license to the next guy in line. This is to let the computer do it.
Well, but I mean, be honest. How many people have you talked to in the last 2 to 3 years that has said they love this versus the amount of said it's not even worth my time to even do it anymore because you can't hardly get a tag.
You can't get it. Yep. And good question. Like, is it only my first choice or second choice? It's going to be a box to opt in or opt out at every choice level. So you could say, yes, I'm really interested in a first choice, but if a second choice comes back, no, I don't want to be on that list. So you'll be able to choose that at each hunt choice on your application for any of those primary draw.
Yeah.
That covers the reissue list. Let's see. Okay, we're gonna start doing some overview here, takeaways. But remember, put in your Q&A, your questions down on the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So, what do I do now? Why is it 2028? Oh, it'll be here before you know it. And so that means you got 3 draw years, 25 right now, 26 and 27, to decide what to do to either burn your points or set up a strategy if you haven't been building points, because we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah. I mean, like I was describing in that first, that first deal where we was talking about that muzzleloader tagging 61. Obviously, there's going to be some point creep. I mean, we saw this when Arizona took away all the tags. At least they said only half the non-resident tags could be drawn on that bonus pass. We saw where these areas are a lot of these that had a decent amount of tags that were just kind of floating along, and they were kind of creeping a little bit, but not accelerating. Next thing you know, they did that, and now you started to see those same units. They started to go up a point or more a year. I mean, sometimes like 3/4 of a point or something like that. But at any rate, you will see some point creep more after this takes place in 2028. I really do feel like the people that are in that kind of on the bubble of drawing some of those hunts they've been looking at, maybe 5, 6, 7. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say the point level because it does all depend on tag numbers. But just know that once 2028 hits, we will see some escalated point creep from there on out. Maybe it's not much, but some units could be like that much and more. Now, what's going to happen, in my opinion, is if you're looking at like burning your points now because you're like, man, I'm right on the bubble. I need to go now before I can't catch up to this hunt, before I can't hunt this hunt after 2028. Well, you're not the only one thinking that. So there's going to be a fair amount of individuals that are probably going to overspend a little bit on their points and put in for hunts that take maybe 2-3 points less just so they can get out of that point game and then drop back down. Because honestly, like the ones that aren't going to be hurt as bad are the ones that are taking like 0 to 3 points because there's a ton of tags there. So you're not going to see the point creep in those like you do the others. So we're going to see that. So consequently, what's going to happen is we might see, I mean, everyone remembers the year when they flipped those season dates back, and third season and second season and fourth went to like end of November.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We saw areas like 44 go from 5 or 6 second season deer points to 16. You know what I mean? So we saw this huge jump. Now some of them have came back, but we could see another jump like that for some of these other units is what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of goes into that point dumping beginning this year.
So when looking at draws, how do you estimate where people are going to dump their points, or how do I find a hunt? Like if I'm looking at draws, that's a snapshot of last year.
Yeah.
Say I have 10 points. I'm looking at hunts that took 10 points. Point dumping may mean everybody else is going to flood that hunt and it'll jump. So I need to be looking at units or draws that have less points than I have currently.
Yeah. I mean,
as people catch on.
Good rule of thumb that I always subscribe to is always look at, so what people oftentimes do is they look at their points right now and they say, well, I got 10 points. That hunt drew, 100% with 10 points last year. Yeah, but not one person with 9 points drew, and that's where you were at. So that doesn't mean that you got a 100% shot at drawing that this year. What that means is all those people at 9 points went into now this year at 10 points. And so there might be an increased number of applicants at 9 points. So it's probably not going to draw at that. So I always take a look at what my last year's points were and reference that when I look at the draws. Now, for this year, looking at people point dumping, man, like I said before, you might want to look at 1-2 points underneath what it
Mhm.
took last year to, if you really want to guarantee it to go. I mean, it's, again, points are not a guarantee of harvesting an animal. What they do is they give you options. Maybe this year you don't have as many options as you had last year, but just take a note and look at what some of those options are and be a little bit more realistic with what those options are this year, because you might have to overspend a little bit.
As far as your youth hunters, there's my plug for youth hunters is it's so cheap. Back to that $1.50 qualifying license, $11 per species, no point fees, even for sheep, moose, and goat. Like there's no reason if you want your kid to hunt deer, elk, antelope someday to not build points in Colorado.
Yeah.
The year that they're going to turn 12 is when you want to start applying them there. You have to be 12 to hunt in Colorado, but definitely build them points. If they end up not using them once they turn 18, yeah, it was still a cheap investment.
Yeah.
To consider. I know we've both taken our daughters to Colorado hunting, and I intend to go to Colorado as much with my kids as I would for myself. It's a lot cheaper and it's a great opportunity.
Yep. No, it's great. I mean, honestly, the youth hunters over there, they are very generous to youth. It's a great state.
Yep. Okay. I think that answers what should we do now. Obviously, there's a million different scenarios based on how many points you have. So we definitely want to talk about, what do you do next? Your additional application resources. We've mentioned hunt research tools where you can look at the draw odds. That's going to help you decide what happened last year, how many points it took, and then couple that with your Huntin' Full digital membership, which is free to all onX Elite guys. You can look at all of our unit breakdowns, our comments, our opinions, our research on each of these units, from archery, elk hunts to deer hunts, sheep hunts, all of them in Colorado. And that launches today with our March e-magazine covering Colorado.
And one thing, anyone that has that Huntin' Full account can go into last year's. I believe it's our July issue last year on the eMag, and we do have some of those units listed on there for those archery hunts that actually have those hunter numbers of what they'd figured it was. So you can actually go to that July issue and see some of those areas or some of those numbers for hunter, at least hunting pressure there, and decide how many tags you're going to have this year for that
Yep.
new archery elk hunt.
Anything else you want to touch on there, Dylan?
No, so just I guess yes, to answer your question, as a brief overview again, if you're an onX Hunt Elite customer, first and foremost want to remind you, and if you don't know about it, definitely take advantage. You have a free digital membership to Huntin' Full. So the eMag that Austin and Garth were both referencing, I believe the next one just came out. I got an email today about it, which includes several different states, and it is a invaluable resource as far as non-resident folks if you're applying for new states or even if you've applied there several times. Colorado, perfect example. I've applied for at least points in for several hunts in Colorado for the last like 5 to 6 years. And every year it comes up and I have to relearn what's it going to cost me, all the changes that we've talked about every single year. So the eMag is a super good resource for that. Definitely take advantage of it. It's a good value that you're getting for free. So redeem that. We'll throw a link in the chat for the landing page on how to go about redeeming that Hunt Full digital membership. On top of that, you also get a free membership to Hunt Reminder. So you can go in there and plug in Colorado elk and mule deer. Then you'll get a text reminder saying, hey, application season is open for these. Hey, you've got a week left. Hey, you've got 24 hours left. Don't forget to apply. Um, I've been there before, and it's no fun forgetting an application uh, d due date or deadline by a day, and then you miss a point or whatever that looks like for that state. So take advantage of those. It comes free with your elite membership.
That's right.
And Colorado is part of that new eMag that just came out. And
Yep.
with the Postal Service nowadays, I can't tell you when that sucker's going to hit your mailbox. So log in to the eMag and you can actually have it right now.
Right now. Yep. Let's you guys want to do the giveaway and then we'll do Q&A?
Awesome. Yep. So again, we'll drop a link with the giveaway in the chat. Make sure you get signed up for that. Huntin' Fool is gracious enough. They're going to give away 5 hunt consultations. So I utilize this all the time. These guys are probably sick of me calling them every application season, but I'm going to keep doing it because it's super valuable on my end. But what that essentially is you'll be able to actually get a hold of one of these folks and sit down and discuss actual units potentially. And hey, I've got, you know, I'm throwing out a theoretical here. I've got 5 points. I want to burn them this year. I want to go hunting. Here's the hunt that I want to do, and kind of talk through some of that. So I'm sure Austin, Garth, you guys can elaborate quite a bit on that, but that is a huge, huge value those hunt consultations, and we're going to be Hunting Fool rather is going to be giving away 5 of those. So make sure you throw your name in the hat, and hopefully you're one of the lucky ones to win that.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, every single time after that, I take, some of those phone calls that come in, and I enjoy talking to the individuals on the other end. It's fun just getting a strategy put together for them.
That's right. So link in the chat. I've got a bunch of good questions here queued up, Garth.
All right.
Sure, the onX guys do. So let's talk about Colorado a little bit and some specifics. I want to be clear, and you may have to go back and rewatch this on YouTube, but we jumped around from current state, 2025 changes, and 2028 changes. And I apologize, those are all together, but we'll try to be very clear, in our written content, what is for this year and what does not start till 2028. Like a lot of these changes are not for a couple of years. So
Yeah.
just be clear on that. Garth, here's a good question. Given the 2028 changes, how would you rank Colorado relative to other states as like your best bang for your buck on opportunity hunts?
Ooh, that's so I guess for me, it still ranks up there pretty high. The reason being is you're considering an opportunity state. They still have a lot of animals. I mean, it just they flat have more animals than most other states, and they have more options to hunt than most other states. Where a lot of these other states might have 1 or 2 rifle seasons. They have 4, sometimes 5 in some of these units, and they're fairly liberal with a lot of their quotas. And I've always been a guy that usually turned and burned my points after about 2 to 3 years on deer. Not far long after that for elk. So I still think for an opportunity state, it's great. It's still one of the highest ones, but again, what you are going to start to see is more point creep. It's probably not going to be as good as the good old days, but such is life.
What about all these guys that are saying, we've got a guy saying, I got 30 elk points, I got 26 elk points, I got 10 elk points. Am I in no man's land? Like, what do I do? How do I find a unit?
The no man's land is always tricky, right? Because a no man's land means that you've got too many points for some hunts and not enough for others. And there's kind of a little gap in there in between. So, I mean, I guess my advice to you is you got to figure out what you want to harvest. Like if you're going to a unit that says you want 340 plus bulls, you probably are in no man's land. But now but realistically, you were always in no man's land because you probably weren't going to catch up to 61 or some of these other units that were just barely out of your reach. So now I would say you either have to make the decision where you're like, okay, I'm going to dump my points and go to a unit that's just next tier down right now and try it and see if I can find that bull in there that's going to, hit that number I'm looking for or have the hunt I was looking for. Or you can look at the glass half full and say, well, hell, I never had a chance at getting 61 now, but now I do in 2028. Like I couldn't get it prior to that, but now I actually have a chance. So again, that no man's land, like I touched on earlier, it gives you options, but you have to look at the options that you have. And if they're not adequate for what you're looking for, you might be in no man's land, or maybe you just take one of those options that you can get right now and go.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you one thing, if you weren't catching up to that unit before, you ain't catching it now.
No,
that thing just went boom.
Because your quota got cut in half in 2028.
Correct.
So you still got 3 years to do something.
Yep.
But what's going to happen? We don't know.
Yep.
There was a good question about party applications. Did the draw group talk about merging and taking the average of points? Point banking has been talked about, not using all your points. Yes, that was discussed. Overall, the sentiment was to not allow averaging of points. it creates a necessity of people just building points that maybe aren't even hunters. You're applying grandma and grandpa and everybody with a social security number for points so that you could merge and ride their points someday. And Colorado just said, no, we're not going to allow that. So still party applications, if you apply as a party, there must be enough licenses when you draw for all of you to get drawn. So you draw together, but your application is assigned the lowest point number out of anybody in the group. So if I got 5 and you got 1, our joint application goes in with 1. And so keep that in mind for parties. We don't see that changing. Definitely not for 2028 or sooner.
It's so funny. They bring it up almost every other year, but like the point banking, we did that 1 year.
Yeah.
They did it 1 year, and I swear that gets brought up more and more. And I'm like,
hey,
it must have been popular because it happened 1 year.
Everybody's got an idea. And yeah, I mean, I'll just go back to say, I feel bad for the guys that have waited 30 years and they just really want to hunt something. But you look at that point table, like we put it in the magazine, there's hundreds and thousands of people applying for elk with more than 25 points. Like there's a lot of people and there's just never going to be enough permits to go around no matter how long you wait. We just can't live long enough with thousands of people vying for just a few tags in those top units. So there were discussions about what to do with your points. When you die, can you give them to your kids? Can you pass down a tag or award it to them? At this time, there's nothing being done that way.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Got a couple here too, Austin. This one here. If I return a tag, can I still grab a preference point for that species? So if I draw a tag, return it, can I buy a preference point?
No, unfortunately, they don't issue a preference point for that year. I mean, if you elect to get a refund, you will get your points reinstated that you went in pre-draw, but you cannot get an additional point for that year.
Copy. And then another one here. So this individual asks, can you hunt any unit in the group of units that you applied for? Correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, when you apply for a group of units or this unit plus these units combined, you can hunt all of them. You don't have to pick a unit, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Let's see. Garth, there's a question. For 2025, I believe the resident versus non-resident quotas were also changed favoring residents. Is that true? Because they've been playing with that 75-25, 80-20 split so much.
Well, actually, it favored the non-resident because prior to that, they already made that change in 2024. They went from 65-35 to 75-25 in the low demand units or areas. But then they always had that 80%, 20% split on the high demand areas. So once it comes to 2028, they will make that change to where it gets better. But yeah, I guess 2024 is when they made that change and it got worse for non-residents, but it won't be 2025. It was last year when they made that change.
Year. Yep.
And you will see that in the draw odds. Like you'll see some of these that took a little jump, a little bump in points. And a lot of that did come down to the amount of tags that were issued to non-residents were cut just by a little bit.
Mike's got a good question about weighted points for sheep, moose, and goat. So he says he has 3 preference points, 13 weighted points. Like, is it still worth buying points for sheep, moose, and goat? Because you can opt in to submit your application, just use the points you already have, or submit your application, pay $100 to buy an extra point for that year, which increase your odds the next year. I know, I'll say I do not buy extra points every year, weighted points. They do help you statistically. They are going to increase your odds, but at what cost? $300 a year for sheep, moose, and goat. I choose to spend that money elsewhere on different applications. I'm still in the draw, but I'm just trying to get that random number.
Well, now, herein lies a good question. This is probably something they didn't think about when they did their pitching $15 and $30 preference point fee. Can I opt out like I can sheep, moose, and goat? what happens? Like, I can opt out of getting a sheep, moose, and goat point and just pay the application fee.
I believe you can.
But are they allowing me to opt out of the point fee for
I
deer, elk,
believe
and
they
antelope?
intended it to be the same.
So I would opt out, but I wouldn't get a point.
But you wouldn't get a point, but you could be in the draw.
All right. That's dumb. Well, yeah. I mean, what are you going to go up 0.1%?
Yeah.
Buying a point, maybe.
There's a good question from Edward about contacting an outfitter to book a hunt. Do I do that after I'm successful in the draw? It really depends on what species you're talking about. A lot of outfitters will not want to talk to you unless you have the points necessary to draw on the preference draw, or at least be close to it. Some of them will just say, call me back when you draw and then I'll save you a spot.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit of an unknown the next couple of years, guessing on how many points. Now, for like archery elk, no, they want to talk to you beforehand because they can say, oh, it's a 0 point unit, or it'll probably be 100% draw. So we want to talk to you. So
Yeah.
I'd recommend talking, if you're going to go an outfitted route, talk to them early
Mhm.
and make a plan, but they are going to ask you, have you ever applied before? How many points do you have? You know, those sort of questions.
And obviously that's deer, elk, antelope, bear, stuff like that. Like sheep, moose, and goat, like we said, it's totally
All the
random.
time. Yep,
Call them after.
that's right.
Got one more good one here. So, I know this was covered, but it is a good refresher. So this individual said, I have 5 Colorado elk points. If I draw my second choice, will I keep my points? But the key, is it this year or is it in 2028 when you can no longer apply for a point and then apply for a tag second choice? Is that 28?
That is
Okay,
28.
correct.
Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, he won't burn his points if he applies as a second choice. He'll get to keep his points. And like Austin alluded to earlier, the only difference is in 2028, instead of applying for a point, you just apply for 201 elk and whatever the next one is, second choice.
Really
If you draw it, it's a celebration, but when you don't draw it, you accomplish the same thing essentially.
Here's another thing to think about. Seeing as how in 2028 we're going to have that quota put in place. So if you look at the prior year's quota and you see that quota gets met for the non-resident at a first choice level, you probably shouldn't put that as your second choice, because now if you really want to draw it, you probably won't get it as a second choice, but you'll probably get it as the third choice because that quota is in effect, and they'll just skip over your second choice, go to your third choice. Good Lord, they've done a good job at this.
That quota was a big deal to the residents, not wanting to see more non-residents hunting a unit than
Yeah.
residents. Like resource aside, quantity of elk aside, they don't want to see more non-residents in an area than residents, which is understandable. It's their
Yeah.
fate, but it's messy.
There's going to be some serious gaming of that system coming up once it gets to 2028 and trying to figure out where you need to drop those applications. The good thing is on some of these second choice, like these previous over the counter archery hunts, these V1A hunt codes, we should get a pretty decent idea of where those, like where they're drawing out at, by the time it hits 2028.
Awesome. Well, that covers it on mine, unless you guys have any burning questions that need to be answered. I know you guys covered a lot of them that I had on the list here, kind of throughout the slides.
Sure. There was a question, just are all these changes locked in? Like, where's the public process at? So yes, all these changes have been made. They were proposed in November at the Colorado Commission last year. They were approved at the January Commission meeting. The only asterisk there is they added on that preference point fee for deer, elk, and antelope. The residents are not happy about it. Obviously, non-residents aren't happy about it. So we just met with their big game coordinator last week, and there's a chance, right? They could change that. But the public comment's already been collected. A lot of these changes have already, passed through. So yes, we have some time, but they really wanted a 3-year grace period to educate, redo the system, teach people what's going to happen before they pull the rug out on some of these hunts. But as far as we can tell, yes, we're still trying to understand it. We're still trying to see what it's going to affect. But it is set. They're writing the regs and the rules right now.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, they did have a decent amount of public process. They send out surveys. They came up with some of these draw structures, and they send it out for survey. You could go on, what is it? What's that website? CPW.
Engage CPW.
Engage CPW, and you could take those surveys. So they did have a decent amount of public process, and during those commission meetings, obviously it was about 99% resident to non-resident as far as people that showed up and participated in those meetings. So a lot of times we do get caught off guard and say, well, man, I didn't even hear about this. They did do some, but yeah, sometimes if you're not like just in that loop or keyed into looking for these changes, they do catch you off guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good thing that we're talking about them now. And I will say, on behalf of everybody, I appreciate the fact that you guys and you, Austin specifically, were able to be there and have that voice of a non-resident and B somebody who really understands the process, honestly, probably better than a lot of the residents there, if not all of them. So yeah, thank you for that. I know that probably took some time, but you saying you did that was pretty cool to hear. So
Yeah, I don't know if it's definitely a thankless job when you're on some of these committees, right? People hate you. People, yeah, people are just not happy with it, how it affects them. But it's scary the road we're heading down when they've got people with 39 points in Colorado. That's almost 4 decades, and we start asking the question, what happens now? You know, Arizona's flirting with that, Nevada. Do you redo the system? Do you start over? Are you too far down that route? Like, I would ask anybody who's upset about it, like, what what's the next best option? There's a lot of states that are going to be having similar conversations, how to balance the fairness of the draw and how to keep it sustainable. We need to fight more than ever for hunting rights and privileges and keep it out of the ballot box. At least this went through the CPW commission and not through the legislation. So there's definitely a plus there, but you got to get out and you got to write your comments. You got to show up to meetings. It's a lot of work in every state, but hopefully it's worth it. And we'll keep doing our best to try to be a voice.
Yeah.
yep. Awesome stuff. Well, again, we threw away the giveaway link in there. If you haven't signed up for that, make sure you do so. And then be on the lookout for upcoming master classes, whether it's like an App 101 through us. We've got some turkey stuff coming up for springtime. We've got several more with the folks at Huntin for future application season stuff. So unless you guys have any additional questions or comments, I just want to thank you guys, Huntin for your time this evening and everyone for sticking around. I know there's a lot of folks that got a lot of value out of this one, so thanks.
Yeah.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. This is our full-time job. So use us, use the tools, let us help you.
Awesome. Have a good evening, guys, and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, Ellen.